When you start to look closely at things like deuterium and you see what it does in your body, it's easy to see how it can play a role in almost any disease process, even if it's not the sole cause of that disease. In this clip that I'm going to share, Harry is sharing with you what the possible connection could be between deuterium and cancer, what we already know, and what we need to look a bit more at. I hope you enjoy this one.
There is a lot of evidence and a lot of research now from the Russians in the 60s and from the Hungarians and people like Laszlo Boris and many others who have actually looked at this sort of stuff and actually made it quite clear that the key driver for cancer is deuterium damage of the capacity for the mitochondria to produce sufficient energy and maintain the energy thresholds. See, Thomas Seyfried has already done all the research, but he doesn't understand the sort of differences between how the actual system works. He's got a very reductionist approach. I'll put it that way. I'll be kind. He's a great academic. He's actually I've learned a lot from him, from his research. Don't get me wrong, but I still think he's a bit reductionist in the way he views the cancer problem. Yes, it is a mitochondrial disease, but it's not merely just the mitochondria on their own. You know, the cell isn't just a component that causes the problem. It's the interplay. You have to view it as a system rather than reductionist components being at fault. You damage your level of ability to produce enough ATP. The mitochondria basically pretty much, because they're in communication with a nucleus, just signal and say, well, look, guys, cell, I can't support you. And the cell goes, I still got some viability. So I upregulate oncogenes, and those oncogenes basically run through all these different permutations to see whether I can come up with some viable strategy to survive, in that regard. And then also some of the oncogenes also are involved in signaling for the production within the cytosol to start synthesizing more lactate. And that's sort of part of the process of providing energy to the viruses. Do the same thing. Viruses sort of manipulate the actual nucleus to do something similar to force more lactic acid or lactate production, as it's called, inside to provide them with the fuel that they need to remain viable and to replicate. So they do something similar. That's why sometimes certain viruses can actually cause cancer as well, by gumming up the system, because they tend to also to draw in deuterium into the Krebs cycle to basically, because you're pulling in the glutamate, you're drawing in deuterium, you're reversing the Krebs cycle in order to produce more lactate and more fuel, but also you're dumping in more deuterium inside the matrix of the mitochondria, which will end up damaging the ATPase as well as a consequence of that. So this is a sort of mechanism, and it depends on the type of virus. Viruses that can have more proliferative sort of capacity and can push cells into a cancerous state far more than others. So it depends, and how well they can actually manipulate. There is some thinking that some of the actual what they call the so-called junk DNA, that because that's sort of incorporation of some information from older viruses, that they seem to manipulate part of their genome in order to facilitate some of these nefarious things that they do to get an advantage of survival. That's sort of some of the theorizing. I'm not certain. Still more research that needs to be done in that space to fully understand and elucidate or to explain how all these things sort of work. So we're still primitive in our understanding, but it's quite clear that cells that are pushed into a situation where their ability to produce energy via oxidative phosphorylation for whatever reason, whether it's the virus doing it or whether it's us inappropriately eating, what we're doing is we're undermining that cell, and as a consequence we're forcing it into a sort of a cancerous state, especially if it moves rapidly into a senescent state and doesn't have the ability to be taken out. Because the whole purpose of a senescent cell is I'm a damaged cell, I become senescent, and then I actually start producing CD38 cytokines and going, kill me, kill me, kill me, because that's what it does. These sort of senescent cytokines that are produced for that reason, and that's why I say to people, when you actually put excessive NAD into the system, you could be potentially suppressing that mechanism that's telling the immune system to kill me. So I'm a bit dubious about high dosing of NAD precursors, as I've talked about in the past, for those sort of reasons, because there seems to be the potential risk that something could run away and not be taken out. Now, obviously, the immune system is playing a big role as well, and this is where I have really big disagreements with Thomas Seyfried, pathological disagreements in that regard, where he basically has this sort of protein restriction sort of approach. And I go, well, that's wrong, because the immune system and the detox pathways require amino acids. And in particular, and this is probably one thing that many people don't know about, glutamate itself is essential for the immune system. So if you weaken the immune system, you can't take out the cancer cells. So a glutamine-restricted diet isn't the way to go. It's actually contraindicated. This is why people on low-carbohydrate diets and carnivore diets actually see improvements, because you have to move away from the reductionist thinking. Yes, it can be used as a fuel, but everything can be used as a fuel. And if the cancer doesn't have enough fuel, you know what it does? It starts metastasizing and pushing into other tissue to grab whatever it can. The solution isn't to basically just, take out the glucose. Yes, that is not essential, but don't take out one of the key nutrients that are required for the immune system to function, because you're weakening the immune system, and the immune system, especially the T cells, are the ones that take out. And that other thing that people do, it causes explosive cancers. Why? Because it actually, the little spiky thing actually has a negative effect, a toxic effect on the T cells, leaving you very open for cancer to proliferate very rapidly, even if you've got a very small amount of cancer in your system for that reason. And that's why we're seeing these explosive cancers. It's not accidental.
I was wondering with regards to deuterium, because one of the major reasons for why one would get cancer would be like that there is a mutation or something going on in the P53 gene. Does deuterium have anything to do with that?
There seems to be some anecdotal evidence that it may, but it's not. But it's it's not slam dunk,
right,
in that regard. So it's a thing that I'm investigating. So there is a bit of uncertainty at the moment. There's definitely a relationship with deuterium in a number of processes in the body, and also with the immune system. It does have high deuterium, can have the ability to increase the proliferation of pathogens. And that's a problem, because if the immune system is having to deal with a much higher pathogen load in the system, that means if you've got the immune system tackling more pathogens due to high deuterium, then you've got the problem, you've got less capacity, because your immune system only has a certain level of capacity to deal with a certain volume of problems in the body. It's like it is limited to a certain degree. There is a rate limiting effect on every process that happens in the body. So if certain things are really deranged, and, there's a bit of a triage, where do I put my resources here or there? And it's the same thing when you've got multiple damage. Where do I put my stem cells, as an example? Do the stem cells go to this tissue or to that tissue when there's a lot of derangements all over the place? It's like anything. The immune system's the same thing. And so obviously the more issues you have in the body, it's going to tax the system's capacity to be able to do things and fix things. So I would have to say, yes, there would be a negative effect in terms of immune detox, and many other pathways would have a negative effect due to deuterium. But is it a sort of like a slam dunk, solid research? No, it's more associated at this stage. So we can't definitively say. We can extrapolate, but we can't definitively say that it is cause or has a strong mechanistic relationship. So I'll leave it at that.